Thank you very much, Brother Venkat. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our talk this evening by Dr. Cheryl. I am from the Silvery Dawn Lodge. We are a lodge in the district of Bombay, and this meeting is being held by the Silvery Dawn Lodge under the aegis of the District Grand Lodge of Bombay. Now, there are a lot of ideas about Freemasonry. I'll just take a few minutes of your time to explain the basics. Freemasonry has been around for hundreds of millennia. There are mentions in the 9th century, in the 10th, and the 11th, but there is no written record. The written record is from the last 300 years. And during all these years, we have been made out to be a secretive society. Now, in order to expel this myth, we've been opening ourselves up. And in pre-COVID times, we used to have an open day on the first Sunday of June, where we used to invite members of the public to come and visit with us. But since COVID, all that has gone virtual, but in a way it has been advantageous to us because we've been able to bring in speakers like Dr. Shalin on various subjects of interest, and which also is to dispel this myth that we are not secretive and we are open. And our aim is public outreach, apart from other things. We do a lot of charity and a lot of other public and social work. Worshipful Brother John will give you a brief introduction to the speaker of this evening. Thank you, Worshipful Pastor.
Thank you, Brother Bimal. Okay, I have great pleasure in introducing Dr. Cheryl today. So we are really fortunate to have her, and we always wanted to have these sort of topics which is of general interest to people. And of late we started this, and fortunately the COVID situation actually enabled us to reach out to people, not just from Bombay, not just from our lodge, but across many places. So Dr. Cheryl John Sendilnathan is a psychiatrist born and raised in Mumbai. She currently practices at Dr. L.H. Hiranandani Hospital, Powai, and Dr. Holy Spirit Hospital, Andheri. She is also attached to Seth V.C. Gandhi and M.A. Vora Municipal General Hospital, Ghatkopar, as an assistant honorary psychiatrist. She is currently on the board of trustees of FIAMC and was part of the executive committee of Bombay Psychiatric Society as well as St. Luke Medical Guild. She is currently the convener of the NGO Patient Carer Subcommittee of the Indian Psychiatric Society. She is also the joint treasurer of Bombay Psychiatric Society. Her areas of interest are adult psychiatry, de-addiction, consultation, licensed psychiatry, and stress management. Dr. Cheryl trained in psychiatry at Lokmanya Tilak Municipal Medical College and Hospital and received her MD degree and diploma in psychological medicine. She is a certified personal counselor in the Cardiff model of counseling and also completed DBT training under Marsha Linehan. A passionate advocate of community mental health, the mental health awareness and destigmatizing mental illness has driven Dr. Cheryl to deliver lectures across the length and breadth of the country. So we are so happy to have you, Dr. Cheryl. With that small introduction, I would like to invite Brother Madhav Nair to take the proceedings forward, and he will be the moderator for today's session. Over to you, Brother Madhav.
Thank you, Worshipful Master, Worshipful Brother John. I think it's a very good initiative under your leadership that we have eminent personality as Dr. Cheryl John who would be speaking to us on this all-important topic, which has gained prominence over the last 1.5 years, specifically during the COVID times. I think a lot of us would have had, stress situations both at office as well as at personal levels. Just some housekeeping. I would request all of you to keep yourself muted and let only the speaker, be unmuted. If there are any questions, you can please use the chat box. And also, as Dr. Shell, prior to this, had mentioned that she will give a pause between her talk, and she would like this to be an interactive session. We'll also take question answers at the end of her session. I'm told that it is going to be a 45-minute talk. Over to you, Dr. Shell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Madhav Nair, for allowing me to start my talk. At the onset, I would like to thank the Freemason group for inviting me for this initiative. I think because I was invited, I also was very curious, and Brother John Matthew kind of sent me the details about Freemason, and all my myths about Freemasonry were dispelled. So it was indeed a real honor and privilege to kind of interact with all of you today. And over the next 1 hour, we probably will try to learn from each other. Also, very happy Onam to all of us who are celebrating today. I'll just share my screen. Sometimes when I start talking, I do not realize the time, and I think that's an occupation hazard for psychiatrists. We don't just listen, we also talk a lot. So if I'm kind of going over time, please, Brother Madhav, stop me and kind of tell me that I'm going overboard. If my slide gets stuck or you find that there is a connectivity issue, please let me know. So today I was invited to talk about mind management. Now, very important, a lot of us want to do this, right? Master the mind. Now, I want to ask the august audience here that where is this mind that we actually need to master? So anybody can, unmute and answer that where is this mind that we are here to manage?
Subconscious.
Okay.
Subconscious.
Okay. And where is this located?
Brain. Basically, brain.
So, you're absolutely spot on, there is nothing like the mind. Everything is the brain. So it's a physical organ like your heart, like your eyes, like your tongue. Therefore, just like, when we say that you have to manage something which is a mind, and why I want to talk about this right at the onset of the talk is because many a times when we face difficulties or we see somebody going through a difficult time, we tell them, अपने मन को control करो, right? Control your mind as if it's in their control, or as if it's something that that person can actually carry out on their own. So the first myth, just like you want to break the myth about how Freemasonry is no longer, it's not a secret organization, the first myth that we want to break is there is nothing like a mind. Everything is the brain. So it's a physical organ, right? So this number of emotions that arise in our brain, I would not want to go kind of technical. I mean, we could have an entire session about which part of the brain, which cell is affected, but that's not the topic of discussion today. But we do know that our brain allows us to feel a number of emotions. And sometimes we think that the only emotion that we are supposed to feel is happiness or joy. And any other emotion that we feel is not right. When you're a child, when your parents teach you to brush your teeth. I'm sure, all of us remember how our parents insisted to brush your teeth twice a day. Do you know why that was told to you? Why were we asked to brush our teeth or take a bath?
To condition the mind.
To brush your teeth?
No, to condition your mind to a daily habit.
To a daily habit. And what was the purpose of doing that? What was the purpose of brushing your teeth or taking a bath or wearing clean clothes? I think right from the time you're a baby, you're taught that, right? To brush your teeth, wear your clean clothes, wash your hands. When you study community science in school, they teach you how to take care of your body, isn't it? And why is that? That's because there's a lot of stress on personal hygiene, isn't it? It's more to do with personal physical hygiene. But we do not learn or we do not teach emotional hygiene. What is it that we remember when somebody falls down, a child falls down and starts crying? What do we tell the child? It's okay, don't cry. And I know the majority of the audience are men, and many a times men are told that boys don't cry, don't be a girl, don't be a sissy. Why are you crying? मर्द रोते मर्द को दर्द नहीं होता, right? A famous dialogue. And when this conditioning, like somebody said that we brush our teeth to condition our mind, but when we hear this narrative or a story all the time that you're not supposed to cry, you're not supposed to show these emotions, we do not learn emotional hygiene. So just like how happiness is a good emotion to have, anger, disgust, fear, sadness, these are also positive emotions. What is a negative emotion? Depression is a negative emotion. Extreme anxiety is a negative emotion. The rest are positive emotions. Among these emotions, what disturbs us a lot is anger, isn't it? I mean, each one of us have experienced this emotion, I think, on a daily basis in different forms. Either we are kind of, bursting with anger, or we are a little bit angry, or we sometimes feel like punching somebody on their face. So, anger is a very common emotion, and I would like to focus a little bit on this emotion. Why? Because anger can turn violent. We do see a lot of cases of road rage. Sometimes we do not see rage outside, but inside the homes. And like how Brother Madhav said, that the COVID situation kind of tested a lot of us in our mental health issues. Uh, Very alarming studies in India about domestic violence. There has been a manifold increase of domestic violence. And that's because this anger has turned violent, isn't it? Now, anger has a huge spectrum. It can go from an extreme of from one end, which is called as a silent treatment. And I think most of the men will understand the silent treatment very well because they get it very often from their wives, to a situation where there is murder or physical death. And this spectrum is actually many manifestations of the same sin that is known as anger. Do you know what anger can do to us? What it can do, and like I said, feeling anger is okay. You're supposed to feel anger because it's supposed to be an emotion. But when the anger overpowers us, that's when it causes problems. And what are these problems that we face? We face mental health issues. So you can experience stress, you can experience anxiety, fear, frustration, a lot of relationship issues. So you have quarrels with your family members. A lot of times these quarrels lead to estrangement, misunderstandings. We have family members who haven't brothers who haven't spoken to each other for years together because of an episode of anger where they lashed out to each other. Anger also blocks in receiving financial abundance and manifestations, success. It also causes a lot of physical ailments, hyperacidity, diabetes, blood pressure issues, weight issues, headaches. So anger is a rejecting energy. So rejecting when we uh, you know use anger a lot, we can't receive goodness in life. So what can we do about that? can we think today of some strategies that we can use to take care of our anger? So, like I said, anger all of us feel. So, anybody here can share some tips which they use when they really get angry. Anybody?
Once one of my friend told me that when you feel really angry, then think of a place that soothes you or makes you feel really good. Like if you like beaches or something, then just think that you are in that situation and forget the rest so that you don't overact on something.
Excellent. Something which we call in the psychological terms is guided imagery. Right? You go to a happy place. Very good. Excellent. Thank you so much for that sharing. Anybody else?
This is Anuja here.
Yes,
I don't respond to that anger. I calm myself down. So if there's something that somebody told or a nasty email that made me angry, I take time to respond to it. I say I'm not going to think about it now. I'm going to respond to this tomorrow. And till that time, you actually work out a situation which is a win-win. Uh, I have realized, and I've realized it the hard way, that when you respond in anger, it gets back to you.
thank you so much, Anuja. Excellent. Anybody else? The men are the ones who are not answering. Who have their anger sorted. Anybody?
To avoid the situation, to divert the mind.
So you try
And
to
one,
correct.
yeah,
You avoid the situation or you kind of divert your mind. Thank you so much.
sometimes if you feel you can take a long breath or try to divert the concentration from the situation.
So you divert yourself, right? Many times, the common ways that we usually handle anger is either we act out. So that acting out can be like, मैं बदला लूंगा. Badla not like how Amitabh Bachchan and Bollywood badla, but passive aggression also. Sometimes we just kind of be silent and we kind of try to be nasty to that person or gossip behind the person back or kind of not respond to that person at all. Or we get verbally or physically aggressive. Or we blame the person or we start complaining to everybody else about that situation. Many a times we use substances like alcohol or smoking or other things to numb ourselves when we feel very, very angry. Sometimes we feel that if I just ignore it, it's going to go away. And sometimes we wait for others to help us. They may help in the short run, but are these really helpful in the long run? A very good way of helping in anger is maintaining a diary. Now, when I've written anger diary, it just means that you are kind of writing down about the situation in detail. So it's not occupying space in your brain. So sometimes when you use your laptop and you think that it's got really, the hardware is also loaded with stuff, you use what is it called, the memory bank, I think, to kind of, declutter the things from the hardware of your, a computer. In the same way, when you start writing down your situation in a diary, it's kind of decluttering your brain and it helps in reducing the anger. Another way of dealing with anger is actually try to think about what is the exact cause of your anger. And if you dig deep, you'll find out that you're actually not angry because of that situation, but there is something deeper. Either you're very scared about that situation, or that situation makes you feel insecure. So there is a lot of things. Anger is just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath that, there are a lot of other things. You could be exhausted, you could be hungry actually. Many times when you're hungry also you respond in anger to small things. You could be embarrassed, hurt about something else, and that has kind of built up to a display of emotion which is anger. And the most important thing if we want to manage our anger is recognize your anger. Because unless you recognize that there is a problem, unless you're aware, we can't really do anything about it, isn't it? So some short-term management tips when you're really angry in a situation. This is the skill which is known as the tip skill. So tip means temperature. So it means that suppose you're in a situation where you're feeling very, very angry and furious, take a pause, step out, go to the washroom or go to your fridge, maybe take some cold water and splash it on your face. And I'm saying specifically cold water, or take a towel, dip it in cold water, keep it on your face. What does it do? When we get angry, what gets activated is known as the sympathetic nervous system. That's the one which is responsible for all the emotions that you feel, all the physical changes that happen to your body, the clenching of your face, the flaring of your nostrils, the flushing that you feel when you're angry. But when you splash cold water on your face, you're activating another part of your nervous system, which is known as the parasympathetic nervous system. This helps in reducing this overactive sympathetic nervous system. So, splashing cold water, temperature. Another thing that helps is known as intense exercise. So, the tip scale is temperature. The I stands for intense exercise. You're angry about something, you can do some jumping jacks, you can do push ups, you can go for a run. Is this possible if you're in a meeting with your boss and there is a team meeting and there are a lot of things happening that are not pleasing to you and you're really getting angry and you say, oh, Dr. Cheryl told me to start doing jumping jacks. And you just say, pause, I'm angry, I'm just going to do jumping jacks. Not practical, right? So what can we then do? Like Bhatia sir said, breathe. So this is an excellent method of taking care of anger and it's known as paced breathing. So not just any kind of breathing, but a paced breathing where you breathe in and you count. Breathe into a count of let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. You hold 1, 2, 3, 4 and you exhale longer. So you exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or you're breathing in 3, you exhale 6. Your exhalation has to be double of your inhalation. So short term or an acute management of anger is using the tip, that is temperature, intense exercise and paced breathing. A squeeze ball also helps because you're kind of releasing your anger in a physical form. Short term management we sometimes manage. But what does anger, when anger causes a lot of problem to us in the long run, how do we manage it? So we have to look at this. There is an event. Why do I get angry? An event happens. Then we have an emotional reaction to it. And that emotional reaction leads to a response which is anger. So every time you feel angry and you look back, and all of us can use this time to look back at situations where I was angry. And you always notice that there's an event, an emotional reaction, and then comes the anger. And this is a very beautiful saying. Life is 10% what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it. So we need to change our response to that event. Right? First thing is accept the situation. This is what it is. We get angry because of the COVID situation. When you're going out, driving your car, you're following all rules, you're wearing your mask, and you go out and you see people without the mask, no social distancing, and you're abusing in your car. क्या उसको देखो, हम लोग सब घर के अंदर बंधे हुए हैं, वो ऐसे बिंदास घूम रहा है, ऐसे बेवकूफ लोगों की वजह से कोविड ठीक नहीं हो रहा. And when we go on and on and on and rant, can you change that situation? You can't. So learn to let go of things that you can't control and accept the situation. Another thing is, like Anuja said, that I do not react. So what we need to do in a situation is stop reacting and learn how to respond to that situation. When we react, it's a fraction of a second thing. You just react. You say something to me, I'm going to react. But if you step back and pause, then you learn how to respond. It's actually like this buffering that's happening on the slide. You're waiting for the slide to come up, right? You think that there is another slide coming up and you think it's a buffering happening, but no. This is just how it teaches us how to respond and not react. What do you usually do if you get malaria? Right? Do you find out कौन से मच्छर ने मुझे काटा और मैं उसको मार डालूंगा? Do we do that? No. So blaming the situation does not help. we have to be solution oriented. Most of the time, our anger in the long term can be managed when we shift our focus from blaming the situation to finding out solutions to the problem. From anger, we also move to, like I said, our thoughts are the ones responsible for our emotions. So thoughts cause feelings and feelings lead to actions, right? So let's focus a little bit on these thoughts. Anybody watch these movies? Can you tell me what these movies are?
Pursuit of happiness.
Great. And the other one?
Pursuit of happiness.
Joker.
Joker.
Yes, great. So one is Joker and the other is Pursuit of Happiness. If you remember the story in the movie and you kind of think about it, both the characters in the movie, the Joker as well as Will Smith, they had a tough time. So in the movie, the character Joker, his mother was mentally ill. He was an illegitimate child. He was battling with psychiatric issues. Nobody was giving him a job, and really bad time. Similarly, Will Smith had a similar situation where his wife left him. He was evicted from his house. He had to, leave the house with his son. He had no job. But how did uh, both of them react or respond to their situation? The Joker picked up a gun and decided to become a serial killer. And Will Smith actually used his adversity to kind of flourish and become very successful. So, this is what we're talking about when we talk about managing our thoughts and our brain. There was a study which was done in California about what determines happiness. How do we determine that I'm going to be happy or not? Unfortunately, 50% of it is genetics. But again, like I said, you have to accept the situation. I can't change my genes. The rest 50%, which we can control, surprisingly, only external circumstances contribute to only 10% to whether I'll be happy or not. What do we usually think? That if this situation happens to me, I will be happy. If because I lost my job, that's why I'm unhappy. Because I had a altercation with my wife, that's why I'm unhappy. So we're actually blaming our happiness, whether we achieve it or not, always on external circumstances. But what do scientific studies say? They say that external circumstances contribute only 10%. The rest 40% is your action and your thought. Isn't that amazing? It's something that you and I can change and control. By taking care of my action and thought, I can manage my happiness. But when we do that, there are a lot of annoying roadblocks to our thoughts. And I want you to highlight, I want to highlight some of these roadblocks that we feel. Now, when you see this image, what is it that you think? Like, which of these lines is longer than the other?
They're the same.
Great, they're the same. Okay, now a little maths question. So a bat and a ball together cost 110 and the bat costs rupees 100 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Quick answer.
$10.
Yeah, so you said 10, right? But actually the answer is 5. Now I'll tell you why. Because so its bat plus ball is 110. The bat is 100 more than the ball. So this is how we work up, and actually the cost of the ball is 5. I'm not here to test mathematical skills. What I'm trying to tell you is, most of the time our strongest intuitions are often wrong. This is a very different take from what we're always told to follow your gut. What you feel, your strongest intuition. जो intuition है उसको follow करो. But what science says is that many times our strongest intuitions are wrong. So what does that mean? That means that if I feel that if I get this A plus grade, or we tell our children, or I think there are some children attending, and you feel if I get this A plus grade, then I'm going to be very happy. Or if I just, have this chiseled body, perfect body, I'm going to be happy. Or if I find the right partner in my life, I'm going to be happy. And what does science say? That it may not be true. So most of the goals we think that will make us happy don't actually make us happy. Good grades, great job, perfect body. So what do? Do we stop striving for these things? Do we say, oh, I don't want good grades. I don't want to be healthy. No, the aspect where I'm trying to focus is we do not kind of say that when I get that good grade, I'll be happy. It's about the journey and not the destination. So how do we break this intuition, or how do we break this annoying roadblock that says that our strongest intuitions are wrong? So we break that and challenge your intuition or fine tune your intuition by focusing on the now, by experiencing each moment as it is in the present moment, not in the past and not in the future. And this was a study which was done in Yale University, where they kind of recorded the reactions of children who got the Yale admit card. And that's they've been striving and working hard throughout their high school and done everything to get that admission. And they had recorded I think about 100 or 150 children, and they had measured their happiness quotient at that point of time. They were extremely happy. Once they got into Yale, those children were checked in after 3 months, and they realized that the happiness quotient had fallen. But somebody who's been thinking that only if I get into Yale, I'm going to be so happy, and that happiness is going to last forever. That's a wrong myth. So we have to focus on the now. Every moment that you're experiencing, experience it in the present without any reference to the past or the future. And how do we do that? What happens usually when we wake up in the morning? I mean, a simple task, like we just wake up, and what do? We're taking the brush, brushing our teeth, we're rushing and putting on the water for our tea, we're waking up our children, we're sometimes even checking our WhatsApp to see what was the notification, we're checking our emails. We're doing a simple task as brushing our teeth, we're including so many things and we are not being mindful. So when we want to practice mindfulness, and when I talk about mindfulness a lot of my lectures, because mindfulness is one of the most strongest tools that we can to manage our brain. Everybody tells me, doctor, we don't have the time to practice mindfulness. And I'm trying to tell you that mindfulness is something that you can practice in your everyday life. Even when you can just take out time, 5 minutes when you're brushing your teeth, to actually say, what is the taste of that paste? Aapke toothpaste mein namak hai ki nahi, right? I mean, why do they talk about it so much? I mean, who cares whether toothpaste mein namak hai ki nahi? But what we are trying to do is when we are brushing, we're actually feeling the foam. We're trying to use all your senses at one moment at one task. That helps in mindfulness. There are a lot of mindfulness practices or meditations that are available. And I wanted to just kind of emphasize on the benefits of practicing mindfulness meditation. If you see these two brain pictures, the one before, where it shows, the whole brain is lit up, there is a red, yellow, green. That's a brain before meditation. That's us most of the time multitasking and not able to focus. All the networks in the brain are active at the same time. And then we complain that when I'm sitting to do my work, I'm not able to concentrate. A task which takes me half an hour is taking me 1 hour to complete because I'm all over the place. Because this is what's happening. Our brain is active, all the centers are active at the same time. But if you practice, and this was a scan done not by somebody who was practicing regularly, but after a 10-minute before and after meditation, we can see how the activity becomes more focused. So that's how helpful mindfulness practice is. We move on to the second annoying feature. Why I know we just finished the Tokyo Olympics and I should have put up a picture of the recent Tokyo Olympics, but this one is put up because there was a study which was done post this Olympics. That's why I kind of put this up. And when you see the picture, who do you think looks the happiest?
The bronze winner.
Bronze medalist.
Surprising. And look at the silver medalist guys. So unhappy. And why do we think that?
Which is a pity.
Why? Why does that happen?
Because he lost.
He got a silver medal in the Olympics.
First loser.
And I was I don't know whether any of you after this Tokyo Olympics there was an article about this also which had come up actually, and this brings us to this annoying feature of our mind. And what is that? Is we don't think in terms of absolutes. So when we look at this picture, of course, Michael Phelps is, you know, absolutely thrilled because he got the gold medal. But what about the bronze medalist? What is he thinking? He's comparing himself to the fourth place person. He's saying, I got an Olympic gold and I got it just by a few seconds. So it's few seconds faster than the guy who got fourth place. So, not getting, it was a difference between not getting a medal and getting a medal. And what is the silver medalist thinking? Oh, gold na bas 2 seconds se miss ho gaya. So our happiness is relative to somebody else. So we are not thinking, and this is what happens to us, right? When we are scrolling through Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, you could have had a perfect day, absolutely relaxed at home, enjoying with your family. Or, I see a lot of youngsters who come to me because of stress, because of their Instagram accounts. And they must be having a great day with your friends. And you open your Instagram account and you see somebody else posting. Or you see a husband who has put a poem about his wife, and you're like, shit, nobody expresses this for me. Look how happy they look. Look how satisfied they're looking in their life. So what happens is we don't think in terms of absolutes. Our thoughts are always in form of relatives, and this is an annoying feature of the mind. We're constantly comparing to others in all aspects of our life. Without realizing there's a difference between Instagram versus real life, isn't it? How do we manage that? So we have to reset our reference point. You have to be mindful and concretely observe your experience. You've had a great time, concretely re experience that. Go through that in your head. Interrupt your consumption of social media. Digital detox is the key word in this last COVID pandemic by mental health professionals. Go off your accounts once a week. It's better sometimes if you can just delete all your unnecessary social media accounts and focus on the things that are important for you to kind of, maybe network. So the third annoying feature. Again, there are two pictures here. One is a lottery winner and the other guy is a paraplegic. Who do you think is going to be happy? Anybody?
Lottery winner, obviously the lottery winner.
Correct. And surprisingly, again, this was a study which was done that, of course, when they got the lottery and the paraplegic met with an accident, we can't compare their happiness because they were ecstatic that they won 529 almost $1 million, right? And this guy lost the power of movement. But when they were studying, this is a study which was again done, and a research which said that over a period of time, when you measured their happiness quotient, it was almost the same. And why is that? I mean, this guy is on his wheelchair forever. And they have won about $529 million, which is not going to get over. You can never finish this in a lifetime, right? And that's because of another annoying feature of our mind is we get used to stuff. So you might be thinking, oh, I just want that car and that's it. Or I just want to move from my 2 BHK to my 3 BHK. The first 1 week that you move into your house, which is absolutely renovated, you're happy. And then you get used to it. Does it mean that we do not strive? I'm not saying don't strive for betterment, but I'm trying to say that enjoy the moment as it is. So we get used to the good, awesome stuff that we usually strive very hard to run behind. And this is an annoying feature of our brain. What do? Do we stop striving? Do we stop kind of running or trying to achieve things? Do we stop making advancements in life? No. What we do is we try to stop investing in stuff in the first place, invest in experiences because your experience is unique. Your trip to Mahabaleshwar is different, your experience is different as compared to a friend who's gone. So here you're breaking that thing of getting used to stuff. When you look back at the time that you had a journey or an experience, it will always bring you back the same joy. Vis-a-vis the car which you bought and you're using for some time, it's not the same thing. But that experience is always going to stimulate the same happiness centers in your brain. So try to invest more in experiences. Use the practice of savoring. So what does savoring mean? Savoring means enjoying something at its moment. So whether it is your cup of coffee, like I said, use your senses. So smell the coffee. We only use our senses probably sometimes when we are drinking wine because you're told to smell it and twirl it and let your tongue taste it, but not other things. So if it's a cake from Theobroma or you're having a cup of coffee, experience it completely. That's called savoring, which again helps in breaking the annoying feature of the mind. Another very important aspect which helps in breaking these annoying features is gratitude. When you practice gratitude, you start focusing on goodness. You have better relationships. And all of us, right? Every philosophy, every religion, every spirituality talks about being grateful and thankful for what you have. I mean, this is something that has been told to us forever, but not as science. What science tells us is when you do this on a daily basis, when you practice at gratitude, that is known as an attitude of gratitude, you start feeling better. So how do you do that? Every day before you go to bed, list 2 things in the day with an explanation that you are grateful for. You can use this, I know that a lot of families here, you can use this as a family exercise. Sit together before you go to bed at night and each person tells about one thing that they have been grateful for. When I started this practice in my home, initially it was, oh, we are grateful for the KFC you ordered, or we are grateful for this new shirt. And then we decide, okay, let's stop focusing on, what we ate and the roof above our head and the job that we have. Can I look for one experience in the day that I'm grateful for? And gradually the kids started coming up with, things like I was grateful that the watchman kept my ball safe because I was searching for everywhere, but he kept it safe. What does that mean? That means the child is looking out to see goodness in somebody else. Somebody has been kind to him, and then that's going to carry forward. Or I'm grateful that I was able to have this talk and interact with the Freemasons. It's a new experience, a novel experience for me. So every day, if you are able to sit together in a circle as a family and state one thing or 2 things that you have been grateful for. Sometimes we say, oh, there was nothing that was good in the day. So, okay, then can we look at the challenging situation and see what is the benefit from it? What have I learned from it? That's also how do we practice gratitude. We also need to build resilience because resilience teaches us how to bounce back from a difficult situation. So when we get distressing thoughts and emotions, we have to manage them. Manage them how? We break the roadblocks. So I'm just summarizing what we have done throughout, right? So we first focus on what's going on internally. I'm having a distressing thought. What's going on? What are my thoughts? What are my emotions? How is my body reacting to this thought? And can I change my approach? When I step in, many times you have difficult situations at work. I go to work and I see a lot of patients who are struggling with mental health issues. I hear a lot of stories and narratives which are distressing sometimes. If I come back home, open my bed, my kids open the door and I'm, oh my God, I had a horrible day and I went it out on them, it's not helping the situation. It's not helping me feel better and neither is it helping them. In the same way, when we take out our thoughts on the family around us or the work around us, it's not helping. So first thing is be aware. Notice what is your difficult thoughts and feelings. Name them in your head. Okay, I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling sadness, I'm feeling frustration, and refocus. Try to change that. Engage in something which is more valuable. So by doing that, you change your negative emotion into a positive emotion. So at the end of my talk today, what I would like to focus on is, let's focus on our brain and its health. Let's realize that emotions and thoughts are important. And we have to normalize all our emotions. Let's work on managing our anger better. So short term, we can manage our anger by using the tip skill. Long term, let's learn how to accept the situation. Let's learn to respond and not react. Let's have a more solution-based approach. Also, let's think about how to challenge these annoying features of our thoughts. How do we challenge them? By practicing mindfulness, investing in experiences, by practicing savoring, having an attitude of gratitude like an integral part of our life. A very, very important aspect is digital detox and building resilience. We learn how to turn our negative thoughts and emotions into positive ones when we focus on them. Because I am not what happened to me, I am what I chose to become. Thank you very much. We can now move on to question answers.
I think we have a question on the chat box
Yes.
from Anuja Iyer. She asked that any guidelines or tips on meditation or any recommended technique we can follow.
Right. Any meditation technique is helpful. Each one can find his or her way. Now, meditation may not suit everybody, right? So sometimes when you're extremely anxious and somebody tells you go and meditate, it's not going to help, because if you're just going to shut your eyes and focus, the thoughts are just going to get bombarded. So the easiest way of meditation is focusing on your breathing. So even if you are able to practice deep breathing exercises for a count of 5, a breathe in and a breathe out 5 times in the morning and 5 times in the evening, that itself is meditation. What is meditation? Is mindfulness, being present in the moment, and that can be just by breathing. I think there was somebody who mentioned about when you're angry, you kind of think about a happy place. You can do that when you're breathing in and out. You can imagine, I think there was somebody here who's at a resort and enjoying, I think he was saying he was enjoying all the scenery outside. And when you come back home and you've enjoyed that experience, if you're sitting down and closing your eyes and focusing on breathing, you can imagine yourself at a beach, or you can imagine yourself at a mountain and breathing in and breathing out, focusing on your breath. That is meditation. Loving kindness meditation is a practice of meditation specifically for mindfulness. If you Google it, you will find it is known as loving kindness meditation. It's a 5-minute meditation where there are certain chants that you kind of constantly repeat, that I want to live in safety, may I have peace, may I have happiness. These are few of the narratives, and you keep on repeating it again and again, and that helps you.
Thanks, Dr. Cheryl. I was actually going through a presentation when you had said that we get used to it, but I wish that was true in the banking sector. We wouldn't have had so much of NPAs. More on a lighter note, because people are just greedy and they just acquire wealth and wealth and wealth, and it's never ends there.
Yeah, so that's exactly my point. Sorry to interrupt you there. That's my point, right? Why does that happen? Why is that greed coming in? Because we think that if I have this amount, if I can this amount of money, I'm going to be happy. The idea is that happiness is some kind of a destination which I have to run to reach, and we have to kind of realign our thinking and say it's not the destination, it's the journey. And the moment we realize that half the battle is won.
Absolutely. On a more serious note, Dr. Shil, what are your thoughts on phobias which we have? And also, a lot of books say that, finally, what is brain? Brain is nothing else but some chemical reactions taking place. So can it be altered? And is there something, sorry, I'm asking you extended question on this. Is this also something to do with genetics? Because some people get some, of this psychological disorders late in life, some people get it early in life, and some people say it could be genetically linked. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on these two things, on the phobias and the genetic way of, how can someone sort of prevent that from happening?
Excellent question. So let's first focus on the phobias. Phobias means fear of something, right? So usually, sometimes these phobias have a basis. If you have to kind of really probe, it could have been a very traumatic experience that has caused a response, and now this response is stored in the brain. So that goes to the second part of your question, that everything arises in the brain. So I think when we saw Munaba MBBS and he talked about chemical locha, right? That's exactly what happens. So everything, your mood, your thinking, your behavior is all chemicals in your brain. And I cannot stress it more. That's why when I said mind management, the first thing that I said is not mind management, is brain management. And what happens? Like, so then why should we kind of focus on all these things, right? About focusing on savoring, focusing on gratitude, if it's the brain and we can't control it. When we practice these things or we do these things, we are activating certain good pathways in your brain. It's like suppose I learn 2 multiplied by 3 is 5. And I have learned it again and again. 2 threes are 5, 2 threes are 5, 2 threes are 5. It's got registered that 2 threes are 5. Now I come to you, you're my maths teacher, and mother will say 2 threes are not 5, Dr. Sheryl, 2 threes are 6. And I'll say no. Then you'll explain to me, mathematically, 2 plus 2 plus 2. Then I'm like, yeah, correct. I'll understand 2 threes are 6. But the first time somebody will ask me what is 2 threes are, my first answer usually will be 5. Because that has been a permanent thing which I have learned again and again and again. So I will say 2 threes are 5 and then no, sorry, 2 threes are 6. I correct myself because you have taught me the right way. So that's what happens usually in phobias is conditioning. There's something that happens or experience which happens again and again. A certain pathway of the brain gets active and when you're exposed to that pathway comes up. It's like I love Kaju Katli. I'm just said Kaju Katli and my mouth's watering. You can't see, but there is a lot of salivation. Because there is no Kaju Katli here, but my brain remembers the taste and brings about physical change. So that's how phobias generate. Now, when you talk about genetics play a very, very important role in everything. So there is something known as a stress diathesis model, which we talk about in psychiatric disorders. So most of the psychiatric disorders have a genetic vulnerability. So even like we talked about happiness and I showed you the slide, but 50% of it is vulnerability. So if you have a family history of mood disorders or psychiatric disorders, you are vulnerable. Then if you have a difficult environment, then that vulnerability turns into a disorder. If you are able to handle your difficult environment in a more constructive way by using positive mental health tips like we spoke about some of them, then your vulnerability reduces. So it's very simple. It's like suppose I have good calcium and brother John doesn't have good calcium. He has low calcium. We both fall down a flight of stairs. Because I have good calcium, I may just sprain my leg. But he will definitely fracture his leg because he has low calcium. So our genetic vulnerability is just makes us vulnerable and when there is an environmental trigger, it manifests. When we are younger, an adolescent brain actually by itself undergoes a lot of pruning. So a lot of cutting and reconnections happening. And if an adolescent brain is in a stressful environment, the manifestation of the psychiatric disorders come up more. If you've had a kind of peaceful time and there's not too much of trauma during that time and it goes smoothly, later on in life when there are triggers, you can manifest with disorders. I hope I've answered your question.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Dr. Sheryl.
Question for Brother Vada.
Jaiprakash Bhatia has asked a question. How to be in present as mind goes to past or future frequently?
Yes. And it's an amazing question because the first thing is awareness, right? So the moment when you're thinking about something and if you're aware that you're going to the past or you're going to the future, half the battle is won. So it's just bringing it back to the present moment. We are so used to it. It's a very common thing in every situation. When I'm talking to you now, I'll be thinking about, अरे ये तो question मेरे को कभी किसी ने पूछा था. Or I will say, अच्छा, this question you asked me, I will keep it a note about how to answer it better next time. That's how we are in every thought. But if I say no, okay, let me just bring myself back to the present situation. So if you are not able to do that, like I said, you choose one task in a day, like brushing your teeth. That's the first thing that you do. Just choose to use all your senses at that point of time. It could be anything. You have to activate all your senses. So use your sense of smell, your taste, sensation of touch. You touch your face, you brush. It's a very simple task. It sounds very simple, but we don't do it. So if you can do that, then that's mindfulness.
Brother Venkatraman has asked a question. Can you expand on the beneficial aspects of exercise and anger management? What happens at psychological level?
So what happens at your brain level is when you are angry, which part of it? There's something known as an amygdala or a sympathetic nervous system which is overactive when you're angry. It's upregulated, right? So that's why there are physical changes when you're angry. Like you said, your heartbeat fight response. When you're in a stressful situation, brain goes into a fight, flight, or freeze response. Anger is a fight response. What do we do when we are doing an intense exercise? What we're activating is something known as a parasympathetic, or the other flip side of the coin, where it's helping in calming down all these overactive nervous systems, and then automatically the anger goes down. But that's something which we can practice on a daily basis. So a lot of people who run regularly say that they're able to manage their anger better. It cannot be a stroll in the park. Stroll in the park has amazing health benefits, but if you're focusing only on anger and exercise, it has to be intense exercise. So if you're in a situation where you're very angry and you can exercise, like I said, do 50 jumping jacks. That itself will help you to kind of, reduce the response. Some people have raised their hands.
Yeah, Brother Bimal, anything? Any questions from your side? Please unmute yourself.
Yes, Merciful Brother Madhav. First of all, compliments to Dr. Cheryl on a superb talk. It was fantastic. It is a perfect combination of science along with the ancient wisdom of our Siddhas. The Siddhas have always maintained that the world is ephemeral. Control your mind and you can control everything. Now it is easier said than done. And Dr. Cheryl has given us excellent ways in which we can try and do that. Thank you, Brother Madhav.
Thank you, Brother Bimal. Brother Ankit, you had a question? Please go ahead, unmute yourself and ask.
You're still muted, Mr. Ankit.
Brother Ankit, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yes. First of all, Dr. John, thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Ankit, you are again muted. You have to unmute.
Dr. John, thank you for a wonderful presentation. It was very succinctly put. I am in awe actually of the presentation. There were so many slides, and yet they were all adding meaning to the discussion. I think this was a very good presentation of how slides should be in general. I have a personal question that I would like to ask Dr. John. What I generally do when I'm feeling angry is I go on a kind of a soliloquy rant. So it's more of getting into an empty room, or maybe go to your washroom, or just an empty space, and just rant it out as if the person is who you're angry on, or the person you have an issue with is standing right in front of you, and you're speaking to them, and you're just ranting it out, and you feel a little better after that. It's literally the equivalent of breaking something if you're feeling angry. My question is this a healthy practice, or is this something that still lingers on later on?
So I think it's a healthy practice. It's just like how when I spoke about the anger diary, right? When you're doing an anger diary and you're writing it down, it's out of your system. The idea is to get out of your system. The idea is also when you're ranting, to rant out in a place where there is nobody around. So many a times when people say that if you're angry about something, you just talk to the person and let it out, but that usually doesn't help. Because if I'm angry with Brother John and I'm looking at him and I'm trying to count in my head 1, 2, 3, 4, the more I see him, the more angry I'm going to get. And maybe at the end of my counting to 10, I may just punch him also, right? Because my anger is just increasing. So this very excellent idea of moving away from that situation, going to a place where you're by yourself, having that conversation with that person, and then closing or a full stop. So it's important also to have a full stop. Right. It can become problematic, or it becomes problematic sometimes, how? Suppose I'm angry with somebody and I'm having a conversation in my head with that person. Okay, I'm going to say this and she's going to say this, and then I'm going to respond like this and this is going to respond like this. Yes. And then when I actually meet the person, even if the person just says a normal sentence, I may just burst out on that person, because in my head, I've already had this big conversation with her. And I'm just waiting for her to say a small thing so I can vent out everything. So that's unhealthy. But if you're able to vent it out in a room or on a piece of paper or scream your lungs out, and then that's out of your system, excellent way.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your advice, Dr. John.
Dr. Cheryl, in our corporate life, we were told that, the Japanese, they have a basement in most of the corporations where they have rubber dolls, and they are allowed to go there and bang the rubber dolls, thinking like, that they are their bosses. Because they can't tell their boss anything in a Japanese culture. You can't even argue back. So they allow you to remove your frustration by going and banging on the system. We have a question from Brother Santosh from Trivandrum. Brother Santosh, you can unmute yourself and ask, please.
Yeah, the points which you have said, no, see, like I'm just having a wild thought. See, unlike the physical, I mean, the other medicine, this particular area, no, this is something like a silent killer. These attributes come as a silent killer to kill you. In the sense, it will put you in a lot of trouble. So, where is the point we could judge? Where, for example, if I can't hand it alone, that's the point I should go for a real professional help to come out of the woods. This is a very dicey area, as it's unlike the other medical area. So that's what that it should be a clumsy question, but anyway, I've just thought of asking.
No, Mr. This is an excellent question actually. This is exactly the question where we want to kind of address, and I was hoping somebody would ask this. So thank you for that question. We have to understand, like I said, the moment we start focusing on the brain as a physical organ, like I said, 50% of the problem is solved. Why? Suppose you get chest pain today. You're in this talk and you're getting chest pain. What would you do? Would you tell yourself, oh, it's a chest pain, my heart, don't beat so hard, let me just ignore this pain? No. If you get a chest pain, you will rush to the emergency of a hospital, even if it's 3 o'clock in the night, because you're apprehensive that this could be a heart attack. Right? You won't think it could just be gas. It could be the Onam Sadhya that you've had and really indulged in, but you won't think about gas. You will think when the chest pain comes that this is a heart attack, and you will go and get it addressed. You'll be happy that it is gas and come back, or it was only gas. But you will get an ECG done. In the same way, when you experience changes in your mood, in your thinking, or in your behavior, which causes problems to you in your day-to-day life. And this is important, these three aspects which are brain control. And when I say brain, the chemicals in your brain. If your mood is changing very often, or you're feeling sad or angry or suspicious for more than about 2 to 3 weeks, if your thinking is constantly in a negative loop, and it's causing problems to you in your day-to-day life. You're not able to function to your optimal. You're not able to maintain your relationships. There is no harm in going and getting it checked out. You could have just go and get it checked out. The doctor would say, no, I don't think you have a problem. This is an issue which you're probably stressed because of this particular situation. I will teach you how to handle this situation, and that's it. So the doctor will say, okay, take Digene, or the doctor will say, no, we're done ECG, this is a heart attack, you have depression, let's treat it. Depression is a very, very common problem. 1 in 5 of us will experience it at some point in our lives. We are about 20, so 4 of us already will experience it at some point in our life. It's that common. So when 2019 December, the statistics in India was 1 in 7 people. Post-pandemic, it's 1 in 5 people. And depression is a decrease in the good chemicals in your brain because you're using your brain more. And you're not doing, it's like, you have an iPhone, you have the latest iPhone, you have all the apps downloaded, you keep on using it, you don't charge it. It shuts down. Then it doesn't matter whether it's an iPhone or whether it's a Nokia handset, right? It's not working. So when we are not kind of taking care of our mental health, and sometimes even when we take care of our mental health, you can develop physical symptoms of depression and uneasiness, and you must get it checked out from a doctor. The best thing is to go and meet a mental health professional. Why do we stress so much about it? When you talked about, how I go about creating mental health awareness, this is an important part. Because when you open the newspaper and you see every second article page will have somebody who jumped off a building, who committed suicide, and we wonder, why nobody realized that this person had a problem? How did the family miss it? It's not that they missed it, they probably didn't realize the seriousness of the situation because we thought that it's in your mind and you can control it. So we just tell them, "अरे तुमको उदासी लग रही है." What do we tell our friend if he's feeling sad or he's stressed? "अरे don't worry यार, come let's have a beer together." Or do we say, "छोड़ो ना यार, let's go and eat butter chicken," or go for a run, or you just breathe and things will be okay. You know, those kind of things. But if we kind of look at it as a medical problem, then most, because suicide is the most preventable cause of death, and unfortunately is the highest, the most common cause of death in 20-year-olds in the world today, higher than any other cause of death. And that's something which is preventable, right? And that's because we are not aware that these are things to do with our brain. There is so much of stigma associated with this aspect that, oh, it's a psychiatrist, let's not go because it's a mind which you can control. You know, when people come to psychiatrists and I have a half an hour slot, I'll understand the problem in 10 minutes. It takes me 20 minutes to convince a person that this is a physical problem and why they need medications. You know, so that's how I think any change that you feel, go and get it checked out. It could be nothing, and if it's something, we treat it. You don't get addicted to medications for life. They're not going to cause changes in your brain forever. इसकी आदत नहीं लगेगी. All those are myths.
Thanks, Dr. Sharil.
Thank you, sir.
Brother John, you had a question?
Yeah. So, Dr. Cheryl, to the wonderful presentation. So I have a two-part question. The first part is, all of us, face some mood swings, some, depression at some point of time, or maybe once in a week, once in a month. So at what level we will need to go to a doctor to address this particular problem? So isn't it normal to feel mood swings or this sort of depression?
Absolutely, absolutely. So like I told at the beginning, sadness is a positive emotion. So if you don't feel sad, then something is wrong. So you're going to feel sad if there is a situation that makes you feel sad. Or you're going to feel sad if you have a stressful day or you have not achieved your targets, you worked hard. There is an environmental situation and you're feeling sad. Sad once a week, once in a while is fine. If your sadness comes up without any reason, you don't know why you're feeling sad, there is no trigger, but you're just sad all the time. If it lasts for more than 2 weeks, if it's associated with lack of interest in doing things, or things which you had fun doing before, you loved watching Netflix, you loved your coffee, you feel that you're not interested anymore. You get feelings of hopelessness or worthlessness. You have sleep or appetite changes. Sometimes depression comes with no changes in mood. It could only be pain symptoms. You can get headaches, aches and pains. You go and get it checked with multiple doctors. Nobody can figure out what's wrong. And when we probe, we realize that this is depression. So anything that lasts continuously for more than 2 weeks needs to be addressed.
Okay. So second thing is, I read somewhere about plasticity of the brain, the ability of the brain to cure itself, like body cure some wounds and all. So is it possible to completely rewire the brain? Because you talked about this 50% of the genetic. Is it possible to change brain wire?
It's not possible to change the genetics. What we focus on is something known as epigenetics. So we focus on an approach where we reduce the vulnerability by able to take care of the triggers. Because you can't change the wiring. Neuroplasticity is an excellent thing. What is neuroplasticity? Like you said, the brain bouncing back, right? How does that happen? That happens when you're sleeping well, when you're taking care of exercise, when you're practicing meditation, when you're practicing positive mental health tips, like I said, savoring, gratitude, resilience building. When you do this, it's neuroplasticity. When you do exercises for your brain, when you practice, when you do Sudoku, when you're doing Mandala artwork, when you're doing brain focused activities, that is neuroplasticity.
Okay.
And
So is it possible to stop the medication also?
yeah, so what we usually say, suppose the need for medication comes when there is an acute deficiency of certain chemicals. So what we first do is we correct the imbalance. Suppose I'll give you a simple case of somebody has come today to me and they're having depression for last 3 months. It was because her family member had passed away in February because of COVID. They came now in August because they thought that her feeling sad is normal because she lost a very close loved one, and we would also think the same. But that sadness lasted and caused deterioration in her day-to-day activity, so she came to me today. Now the sadness is so severe that she's unable to get out of bed, she's not able to focus on her work, her job is at stake. So at this point of time, my first concern is correcting the imbalance. Once I start, and when we start any medication, it does not start working immediately because it's actually causing changes in the molecular level. So it takes about 2 weeks for the medication to even start working. It takes about a month for the person to start feeling 100% fine. Then this neuroplasticity factor which you're talking about, that's what the medication does. So it actually brings about changes in your brain cells. That takes about, let's say, 3 to 6 months. So usually when somebody has a diagnosis of depression or anxiety, we recommend medications for 6 months. At the end of 6 months, we reduce and stop. Now, after the first 1 month, when the person starts feeling better, then we introduce the other aspects of exercise, lifestyle modification, how do we handle the psychological stressors better, because those act as compounding factors or benefiting factors to the medication. So it becomes like 2 multiplied by 2 is 4. We just have the medications also to work better. And at the end of 6 months, we reduce and we stop. There are certain disorders that require medications for life. Those are disorders like somebody who has juvenile diabetes or somebody who has hypertension and needs medication for life. But there are other disorders, not common.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Cheryl. I think I will request Brother Manji Patel, who has joined in from London, if he has any query or any thoughts on this session. You have to unmute yourself, Brother Manji.
The only thing I would say is a wonderful talk. I've thoroughly enjoyed. I've been throughout listening patiently to what Dr. Cheryl had to say. I have nothing more to ask or nothing more to add. It was a wonderful talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Brother Manji, for joining in from UK. Friends, one last question we can probably take. I know it's been a long session by Dr. Cheryl, but probably one last question if anybody has. Else, I will request our Worshipful Master, John Matthew, for a vote of thanks. Thank you all. Worshipful Master, over to you.
Okay, so first of all, it was, as everyone said, it was a great presentation, Dr. Cheryl. We are really, really thankful for coming today and making this presentation. And also, this reinforces my belief that we should have more such sessions. Most of the time, we conduct our sessions something related to masonry and all our work. But I think it's very, very essential that we conduct these sort of sessions, and this reinforces my belief in that. Thank you so much for coming today, and we thoroughly enjoyed, and it's really insightful that, I mean, from all the questions that had come, it was really evident that people really enjoyed your talk. And also, I would like to thank all the brethren who came in and participated, and all the non-Masonic other people who have joined us from outside our lodge. I hope you also enjoyed. If any of you have any comments, please let us know, and we can also include that in our subsequent presentations. So thank you so much. With that, I would like to end.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to interact with everybody. And when Brother John had sent me your information about masonry, and I correct me if I'm not using the correct terms, but it's about how a rough stone, I think, becomes into a very well polished stone. That's how I think our journey in mental health also is. We learn all these things that we learn to become better and better with using more positive mental health skills.
Dr. Cheryl, there have been requests from some of the participants. If you could share your contact details, email address.
I'll just put it on the chat.
Yeah, that will. So if people want to consult you, I'm sure many of us would like to reach out to you. Thanks a lot once again. Thanks a lot for.
Thank you, and good night. Have a great Sunday.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you and good night, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us.
Night, brother.